Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. How many times have you said, "I'm gonna start saving this month," and watched that month disappear just like all the others? I'm not asking to call you out. I'm asking because the answer for most people isn't once or twice, it's every single month for years. And you're not lazy. You go to work, you pay your bills, you try to make it stretch, but something always comes up. The car, the medical bill, the grocery run that costs $60 more than you expected. And by the end of the month, you're basically starting from zero again. That cycle isn't a character flaw. It has a name, it has a pattern, and once you see it clearly, you can start to break it. This video is about saving $10,000 in 6 months, but before the math, before the strategies, I want to make sure we're talking about the real problem, not the version people sell online, the actual one. Because if you've watched videos like this before and still ended up here, the issue probably wasn't that you didn't try hard enough. It's that nobody gave you an honest picture of what this actually takes. That changes today. Why most people never save anything, and it's not what you think. Here's the story most financial advice starts with. You're spending too much on things you don't need, and if you just had more discipline, you'd be fine. Cut the coffee, skip the dinner out, stop buying things on impulse. And look, there's some truth in that, but it's not the whole picture. And for most people working a regular job in 2026, it's not even close to the main problem. The real issue is structural. Wages have been mostly flat for the last 2 decades when you adjust for inflation. Meanwhile, rent has doubled in many cities. Groceries, utilities, insurance, healthcare, all of it costs more. So when people say, "I can't seem to save anything," they're often not describing a discipline problem. They're describing a math problem. The gap between what comes in and what goes out has genuinely shrunk, and in some cases, it's disappeared entirely. That matters because if you walk into this thinking the solution is just willpower, you'll fail again. Not because you're weak, but because you're fighting the wrong battle. There's also something behavioral happening underneath all of this. Most people don't have a clear, honest picture of where their money actually goes. Not a vague sense, a real line-by-line picture. And without that, every good intention evaporates the moment life gets busy, which is always. Here's what I've seen work. Treating saving not as what's left over after spending, but as the first decision you make before anything else gets a chance to absorb it. That shift sounds small. It isn't. It's actually the foundation everything else in this video is built on. We'll get into the mechanics shortly, but first, let's look at the actual number you're working toward, because seeing it broken down changes how impossible it feels. The math you need to see before anything else. $10,000 in 6 months sounds like a lot, and depending on where you're starting from, it might genuinely be a stretch. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But before you decide whether it's possible for you, I want you to see what that number actually looks like when you break it down, because the way we picture a goal in our heads is almost never the same as what it looks like on paper. 6 months is roughly 180 days. $10,000 divided by 180 is about $55 a day. Broken down by week, that's $385. By month, around $1,667. Now, for some people, seeing $1,667 a month feels just as overwhelming as $10,000, and that's a fair reaction. If you're bringing home $3,200 a month after taxes and your rent alone is $1,400, that number isn't realistic without something changing. This video isn't going to pretend it is. But here's what that math is actually telling you. The goal isn't one big move. It's a combination of smaller ones, spending less in some areas, earning a little more in others, and making sure every dollar you do save is actually working instead of just sitting there. No single piece of this has to be dramatic. The power is in how they add up over 6 months. Think of it like a leaking bucket. You could keep pouring water in faster, or you could find the holes first. Most people skip straight to "I need to earn more" without ever stopping to ask where the money they already have is quietly disappearing to. We'll get to income, but the math only works if you're not losing ground on both ends at once. So before you set a savings target, ask yourself one honest question. Do you actually know, within a few $100s, where your money went last month? Not roughly, specifically, because that answer determines everything about which part of this plan matters most for you right now. The goal of $10,000 is real. Whether it takes you 6 months or 9, the path looks the same, and it starts with plugging the leaks before anything else. Plug the leaks first, where your money is actually going. Before anyone talks to you about investing or earning more, there's something more urgent to deal with. And it's not glamorous, but it might be the highest impact thing in this entire video. Most people have money leaving their accounts in ways they've stopped noticing. Not because they're careless, but because modern spending is designed to be invisible. Subscriptions that auto-renew, streaming services you forgot you had, insurance premiums that quietly went up, a gym membership from 2 years ago still pulling $29 a month. None of these feel like much on their own, but add them up across a year, and you're often looking at hundreds, sometimes over $1,000, that left without a single conscious decision. That's the first leak, and it's the easiest to fix. Go through your last 2 bank statements, not your memory of them, the actual statements, and flag every recurring charge. You'll find something. Almost everyone does. Cancel what you're not using. Call and negotiate what you are. A 10-minute phone call to your internet or insurance provider asking for a better rate works more often than people think. Companies would rather keep you at a lower margin than lose you entirely. The second leak is subtler. It's the spending that happens on autopilot. The $14 lunch because you didn't have time to think about it. The Target run that started as "I just need one thing." These aren't moral failures. They're the result of not having a system. And without a system, the default is always to spend, because spending is the path of least resistance. Here's a simple reframe that helps. Every unplanned purchase isn't just its face value, it's also the time it takes to earn that money back. If you take home around $20 an hour, a $60 impulse buy cost you 3 hours of your life. That's not guilt, that's just information, and information changes decisions. The goal here isn't to make your life miserable by eliminating everything enjoyable, it's to make your spending intentional. There's a real difference between choosing to spend money on something and just letting it happen to you. Plug the leaks first, then we talk about making what's left actually grow. Make your money work while you sleep. Once you've stopped the bleeding, the next question is simple. Where is your money sitting right now? If the answer is a regular checking account, or worse, just accumulating in your main account where it's easy to spend, then you're leaving real money on the table. Not investment-level money, but meaningful money, especially over 6 months. Here's something most people weren't taught. A standard checking account pays you essentially nothing to hold your cash. The national average for a traditional savings account is somewhere around 0.5% interest. But high-yield savings accounts, HYSAs, have been offering anywhere from 4 to 5% annually. On $5,000 sitting in one of those accounts, that's roughly $200 to $250 in interest over a year just for putting your money in the right place. It's not life-changing on its own, but it's $200 you didn't have to work for, and that's the point. This is what people mean when they talk about making your money work for you. Not some passive income fantasy, just the basic principle that every dollar you save should be earning something while it waits. If your employer offers a 401k with a match and you're not taking the full match, that's also worth addressing. A 50% match on your contributions up to a certain percentage of your salary is essentially a guaranteed return that no investment can reliably beat. If that option is available to you and you're not using it, it's worth at least understanding what you're leaving behind. For money you won't need for several years, a Roth IRA or a simple index fund introduces you to compound growth, where your returns start generating their own returns over time. The math on compounding is slow at first and then quietly extraordinary, but it requires patience and it requires starting. Those two things stop more people than the complexity ever does. None of this requires a financial advisor or a large sum to begin. Many HYSAs have no minimum balance. Many brokerage accounts let you start with $1. The barrier is almost never what people think it is. The shift here is mental as much as practical. Stop thinking of saving as money you're setting aside and start thinking of it as money you're putting to work with a job to do. Increasing your income. The realistic version. This is the part of the video where a lot of financial creators tell you to start a side hustle, build a personal brand, or monetize your passion. And maybe someday that's worth exploring, but if you're working full-time, managing a household, and running on fumes by Thursday, that advice isn't just unhelpful, it's a little insulting. So let's talk about what's actually realistic. The fastest way to increase your income in the short term isn't building something new, it's maximizing what you already have. If overtime is available at your job, even a few extra hours a week adds up significantly over 6 months. If you have a skill you use at work, writing, accounting, design, logistics, teaching, there's likely someone willing to pay for that same skill outside of work hours on a smaller and more manageable scale. Not a full business, just occasional work that fits around your actual life. Selling things you own but don't use is underrated. Most households have hundreds of dollars sitting in closets, garages, or storage units. Electronics, furniture, clothes, tools. Platforms like Facebook Marketplace and eBay have made this genuinely simple. It won't get you to $10,000 alone, but it can fund an early chunk of your goal and build momentum when momentum is hardest to find. If a raise is something you've been putting off asking for, this is also worth revisiting honestly. The average raise from switching jobs has historically been significantly higher than the average internal raise, sometimes 2 to 3 times more. That's not an encouragement to do anything reckless, it's just information worth having when you're trying to close the gap. What won't work, at least not in 6 months, is anything that promises income without a real exchange of time, skill, or assets. Be skeptical of anything that sounds like a shortcut, because in the short term, there aren't many real ones. The honest truth is that for most people, closing the gap to $10,000 will require both sides of the equation, spending less and earning a bit more. Neither one alone is usually enough, but together, even modest movement on both sides creates real compounding progress. And if you've made it this far, I just want to say something quickly. If this kind of honest, practical conversation about money is what you've been looking for, I'd love for you to subscribe and come back for more of it. No hype, no shortcuts, just real talk about real financial situations. Hit subscribe if that's the kind of content you want more of. Now, all of this works if it's built into a system, because information without structure fades fast. Let's talk about that. The system. How to automate your way to the goal. Here's something worth saying out loud. Willpower is not a reliable financial strategy. Not because you lack it, but because willpower is a finite resource. It gets depleted by stress, by long days, by decision fatigue. And if your savings plan depends on you making the right choice every single time, at the end of a hard week, after an unexpected bill, when your account is lower than you'd like, it will eventually break down. That's not weakness, that's just how humans work. The solution is to remove the decision entirely. Automating your savings means setting up a transfer the same day your paycheck hits that moves a fixed amount directly into your high-yield savings account before you ever see it. Not what's left over at the end of the month, the first dollar, not the last one. Most banks and credit unions make this straightforward to set up in under 10 minutes. If your employer allows direct deposit splits, you can have it go directly there without ever touching your checking account. This works because it changes the baseline. Instead of starting the month with your full paycheck and trying to resist spending it, you start with less, and you adjust to that number naturally over time. It feels tight for the first week or two, then it becomes normal. The second part of the system is creating friction around impulsive spending. This isn't about punishment, it's about interrupting the autopilot, removing saved card information from shopping apps, using a separate account for discretionary spending with a set weekly limit, giving yourself a 48-hour rule on any non-essential purchase over a certain amount. Small barriers make a real difference because most impulse spending isn't deeply wanted, it's just easy. The third piece is tracking progress without turning it into an obsession. A simple spreadsheet or a free app that shows your savings balance growing week over week does something important. It makes the goal feel real. Progress is motivating. Watching a number move, even slowly, keeps you connected to why you started. You don't need a complicated budget with 40 categories. You need 3 things: money moving automatically toward your goal, a little friction around spending, and a way to see that it's working. That's the whole system. Simple enough to maintain, strong enough to actually get you there. Scaling the mindset. From 10K to any number you set. Let's zoom out for a second. Everything you've gone through in this video, identifying where money leaks, making savings automatic, being honest about income, putting your money in places where it earns, none of that is specific to $10,000. That was the example. The number was never really the point. The point is that you now have a process, and a process scales. Someone who learns to save $10,000 doesn't do something fundamentally different to save $50,000. They apply the same principles with more consistency, more time, and usually a little more income as their situation evolves. The gap between where most people are and where they want to be financially isn't usually a knowledge gap, it's a systems gap. They know they should save, they just never built the structure that makes saving the default instead of the exception. That structure is what this video has been building toward. And here's something worth sitting with. The hardest part of this process isn't the math, it's the first 2 or 3 months when the progress feels slow and the sacrifices feel real and the goal still seems far away. That phase is where most people quit. Not because the plan stopped working, but because they couldn't yet see that it was working. If you stay in the process long enough, something shifts. The account grows, the habits solidify, the anxiety around money, that low-grade financial stress that hums in the background of so many people's lives, starts to quiet down. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer just reacting, you're building. That feeling is available to you at $10,000. It's available at $25,000. It doesn't require a 6-figure salary or a windfall or a lucky break. It requires a system you actually follow, applied consistently over time. The economy is genuinely hard right now. Costs are high, wages haven't kept up, and the margin for error is thin for a lot of families. None of that is your fault. And nothing in this video is meant to suggest otherwise. But within the reality you're actually living in, there is room to move. Maybe not as fast as you'd like, but forward. And forward consistently is how every meaningful financial goal gets reached. So here's where we are. You now know why the generic advice never worked, because it was treating a systems problem like a discipline problem. You've seen the math broken down into something real and manageable. You know where money quietly disappears, how to make what you save actually grow, how to look at income honestly without romanticizing it, and how to build a structure that doesn't depend on you being perfect every single day. That's not a small thing. Most people go years without having this picture laid out clearly in front of them. But I want to be honest with you about one more thing before you close this video. Knowing this isn't enough. Information without action has a very short shelf life. The people who actually reach goals like this aren't the ones who watched the most videos or read the most articles. They're the ones who did something small today and then kept going. So here's your next step. Just one. Open your bank account and look at what's been leaving on autopilot. Subscriptions, recurring charges, anything you didn't consciously decide to spend this month. That's it. That's the first move. It takes 15 minutes and it will show you something real. From there, everything else in this video becomes a next step you can actually take. Not all at once, not perfectly, but steadily. The goal of $10,000 is real. The timeline might flex depending on where you're starting from, and that's okay. What matters more than the number is that you stop leaving your financial future to whatever's left over at the end of the month and start treating it like the priority it actually is. You've been dealing with financial pressure long enough. It's time to start building something that works.